Mr. Sergeant of Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 113th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative White will introduce the chaplain of the day. Representative White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my privilege today and honor to have our chaplain of the day, Dr. Frederick Dwayne Tappan, is with us today. He is the senior pastor of Eureka True Vine Baptist Church in Memphis and been the pastor for the past 27 years. He's also an adjunct professor at Southwest Community College. He has been a lead investigator in our public defender's office for the past 15 years. And he's also a radio show talk host in Memphis on KWAM 990, which I used to go on about weekly to kind of clarify a few things. But most important, Dr. Tappan and I have been friends now for about 18 years. He is a great Memphian, and I'm so honored to have him here today, as well as his wife, Regina, and daughter, Alexi, up here somewhere. Wave. Right over that way. Okay, there they are back there. Dr. Tappan.
I'm honored to be here today among such great and honorable men that are here to lead and direct the direction of this great state. My prayers are with you on this day. May we pray. Most gracious and eternal God, we gather today in these halls of legislative justice as a grateful people who enjoy the many blessings you have bestowed upon this nation and state. Please bless our duly elected and appointed officials to seek your guidance and direction as they enact laws that we hope will ameliorate and empower the citizens of our great state. Lord, allow the sentiment and perspective which inspired the founding fathers of our nation to create this democratic experiment undergirded by the credo, one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Rest and rule the day. May these legislators be given divine wisdom and courage that is beyond their own knowledge and capabilities. Bless them to be a collaborative collective to lead this state to the dawning of a new day with a renewed trust in you that will lead to peace, propriety, and prosperity. We pray this prayer in your son Jesus' name. Amen.
Representative White will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, guests, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 86 members present.
Let the journal reflect Representatives Darby, Hakeem, Crawford, and Hell are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring Representative Moody. You are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I request that the Sergeant of Arms escort our guests into the chamber.
Mr. Sergeant of Arms, escort the guests to the well. Representative Moody, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I request that the clerk read the resolution, please.
Mr. Clerk, read the resolution.
House Joint Resolution 1004 by Chair Lady Moody and others, a resolution to posthumously honor and commend Taylor Nicole Townsend for her efforts in the fight against human trafficking. Whereas the members of this General Assembly are proud to pay tribute to those exemplary Tennesseans who work with purpose and conviction to improve the quality of life in their respective communities. And whereas Taylor Nicole Townsend was one such individual whose tireless devotion to the fight against human trafficking most certainly made an impact on the state of Tennessee and its citizens. And whereas Taylor Townsend was a juvenile sex trafficking survivor from West Tennessee, her trafficker was prosecuted and served a prison sentence for sex trafficking a minor in Tennessee. And whereas once free from trafficking, Ms. Townsend provided information to the TBI special agents in May 2015, including the meaning of code words, phrases, and messages used to commit the crime of human trafficking, as well as details regarding internet and web services utilized to facilitate online solicitation of children for the purpose of sex trafficking. And whereas Taylor Townsend thanked TBI agents saying, "Thank you for being willing to rescue someone like me." And whereas utilizing the critical information provided by Taylor Townsend, the TBI conducted 14 covert operations, codenamed Someone Like Me, from June 2015 through February 2018. The Bureau arrested 281 individuals for engaging in crimes associated with human trafficking and the illegal sex trade, and recovered 29 women and 4 juvenile survivors of human trafficking. And whereas Taylor Townsend was embraced by Middle Tennessee's human trafficking recovery community and Core Tennessee, Thistle Farms, and Rest Stop Ministries. However, trafficking can rob survivors of self-esteem and make them feel ostracized, and the tactics traffickers use to ensure and manipulate victims, most commonly drug addiction, can have lasting effects. And whereas Taylor Townsend lost her battle with trauma and addiction in 2024, but she leaves behind a tremendous legacy of courage, friendship, and kindness. And whereas it is fitting that we honor the memory of Taylor Townsend, whose strength and advocacy saved the lives of vulnerable Tennesseans and aided the TBI in the fight against human trafficking. Now, therefore, be resolved by the House of Representatives, 113th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the Senate concurring, that we posthumously commend Taylor Nicole Townsend for her courageous work in the fight against human trafficking, honoring her legacy and extending our gratitude to those individuals on the front lines who continue this important work.
Representative Moody, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. And I want to make sure I recognize our co-workers here, Representative Littleton and Senator Don White. And as we first came up here, Representative Jim Coley was carrying all this legislation. And so we just want to honor his name too, and remind people that, you know, he took this on early and included us and many of you. So we want to recognize his work in all of this. And so our first presenter, we have 3 that would like to speak. Just a moment. So I will recognize now Margie Quinn, who is now the Commissioner of DCS, and let her have her remarks.
Thank you, Chair Lady Moody. Thank you, members of the General Assembly, for this honor in recognizing Taylor Townsend and her tremendous service to the state of Tennessee. Thank you to the General Assembly for your fight against human trafficking, which is a scourge upon this state and the nation, and all the things that we've done in the last 15 years in our fight to end human trafficking. Taylor Townsend was a huge part of that, which has gone unrecognized until today. And I thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce our Director of the TBI, Mr. Roush.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to be here. Thanks to this body, this assembly, for your continued support for the efforts in this space. Last year, you provided as an additional 10 agents to work in this space, and those agents are actively and aggressively pursuing the effort to deal with this issue in Tennessee. And so we appreciate that great support. And we also want to recognize Taylor for the work that she did in this space and the information she provided. I think it's critical that we understand the victims in this space and we listen to those voices, and that's what TBI has done in this case when we worked with Taylor, and we continue to do that as we continue to fight this scourge, as Commissioner Quinn mentioned. So thank you all so much for your support and for this resolution.
And now I'd like to ask Sheila McLean, who is now with Thistle Farms. And I met Sheila when we were still over in War Memorial, and she was here to help testify on a very important bill. And so it's a blessing to see how she has grown and how the Lord is using her. So Sheila.
I just want to say thank you. I can't because I'm going to cry. But look, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's all I'm going to say.
I'd like to introduce someone very close to Taylor. This is Heidi Fields. She's also a human trafficking survivor, but she was also Taylor's best friend. So Heidi.
I just wanted to share a little bit about Taylor's character. Um, Sorry, I just found out a couple minutes ago that I might be able to do this because she was just so kind and cared so much about everybody else. And when she was first, pulled out, first rescued, it was not a good experience and people were not kind to her. The people who were supposed to help her did not help her. And so it was very important to her that she showed kindness and compassion and understanding and that she was there for everybody else because for a lot of her life, nobody was there for her. And she's not just another number or another statistic. And I don't want her death to be in vain. So when you think about Taylor, when you think about human trafficking victims, and I don't know, just have the kindness and compassion, even if you don't know them, you don't know their story. But she was a very incredible person.
And just, I would like to introduce the others standing here with us, Rondi Smith with Rest Stop, and also for Randy Wosick, he was also with Rest Stop. So I encourage you, again, that theme of someone like me. So anybody out here listening that may need help, these folks are here for someone like you. Thank you, members. Almost forgot. Mr. Speaker, could we have a picture?
Welcome and honoring Representative Martin of Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to take an opportunity to welcome Henderson County youth leadership that are here today. Thank you all for joining us, as well as my page for the day from South Gibson High School. Mr. Brock Owens is here. Welcome him. Thank you.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Big day in the Williams household today. Abby and I are no longer parents of teenagers. My youngest, Carson, we call her Lulu, turns 20 today. I hope you'll wish her a happy birthday. Thank you.
Representative Sherrill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Up to my left, up in here in the gallery, if you would, make welcome Mr. Jim Payne. He's with our Housing Authority from up in White County, and some other members that's with him too. Make them welcome, please.
Representative Slater.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I would ask you to join in standing with me to honor a fellow educator who passed away this weekend. Robert Odom was just an excellent teacher. All of us have teachers that we remember, and sometimes we call them our favorite teacher. I had the opportunity to work with Robert for 20 years. And I can't tell you how many times students told me and their parents told me that he was their favorite teacher. So today I stand in honor of Robert Odom, and I stand with his wife Leslie, daughter Rachel, son Paul, daughter Amanda, and their grandchildren, in just remembering a life well lived in the life of Robert Odom. If we could have a moment of silent prayer for the family.
Thank you. Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I stand today a little saddened. My great uncle passed away Saturday morning. He was a high school basketball coach, taught school for a number of years, well respected and loved by his community, those that he coached and taught, kids, grandkids, great-grandkids. He lived a nice ripe age of 84, but the sickness finally got him on Saturday, but he's home with Jesus now. So if y'all just take a moment of silence for Johnny Durrell, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have two items tonight. First of all, I'd like to welcome my page this evening, the valedictorian of his class at Dixon County High School and the gold medalist for extracurricular activities as well. An honorable mention with boys citizenship from Dixon County High School. Please welcome Bo Kerr. And along with Representative Williams, tomorrow will be the 23rd anniversary of my wife and I becoming parents. Our oldest will be 23 tomorrow. So happy birthday, Avery. We love you.
Representative Sabicki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, if you could join me in honoring a lady, Adrienne Lee Sanders Law. Fought for over a year battling cancer and finally succumbed to it on the 21st. She's laid to rest today by her family. And you know them, there are those members of your church that you meet that always have the smile, always make people feel welcome, always are there for the children, and that was Miss Law. Very tough times in our church at West 7th, but she is home with her Savior now, so if you could just keep her in your thoughts for a moment of silence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to welcome to the House a group of scholars, the Leadership Knoxville Scholars Program. I think they're behind me, so they probably don't see me, but the program's in its 11th year. It's a joint program between Leadership Knoxville and the University of Tennessee. at Knoxville. It's a huge commitment. It's a 2-year commitment where they take a junior class of 25 of the best and brightest each year, and they take them through a rigorous program in leadership. And they're here today in the gallery to understand how state government operates at a deeper level. So if they would stand and you give them a round of applause to the Leadership Knoxville Scholars Program.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have 3 recognitions this evening. I'd like for the House to help me recognize Mr. Michael Miller, who is with the Housing Authority from Hardeman County, who's up in the balcony behind me to my left. Then his daughter is here today. She is going to be my shadow for the next couple of days, Mrs. Bethany Miller, who's also a member of the Hardeman County Courts in Hardeman County. And then we have Mr. Mashawn Gatlin, who is with them as well, who will become a commissioner in the Hardeman County Commission coming up on this November. They are all in the balcony behind me on my left. If you would help make them welcome, I would appreciate it very much.
Representative Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we could all rise for a moment for a young gentleman, Riley Strain, who was the University of Missouri student. His body was found this week in Nashville. And I just want to thank all of the emergency personnel that supported in his finding, and that our thoughts and prayers are with his family, and that will continue to ensure public safety downtown. Thank you.
Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please join me in welcoming Bradley Leadership Cleveland and Bradley County, sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce. They're in the gallery to my right. Miss Lisa Fain is their leader from the Chamber of Commerce. So glad to have you with us. Thank you so much. And if I may, Mr. Speaker, I'd like for you to be much in prayer for our Sheriff Steve Lawson, Bradley County. He and his wife were involved in an accident Sunday after church. They were on I-75 and there was a rear ender. The sheriff suffered some head injury. There was slight bleeding on the brain and fractures in his spine, but he is now out of ICU. The bleeding has stopped, so we're hoping for the best. Please keep him in your prayers. Thank you.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, over the last 14 years, I've had all of my children at some point in time become a page. And my 12-year-old Tucker is here tonight, and he works for free. So y'all just page him on up. And my 15-year-old son, Asher, is up here in the balcony somewhere. Y'all make him welcome.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. On Saturday, we laid to rest Dr. Todd Brooks. Todd was a very close friend. It's nothing more important to me in my life than my children, my 3 children. And Todd was one of only 3 homes that they ever spent the night in overnight. He had 3 children who were the same ages as my children. Todd was very active in leadership as a servant leader in the community, in the health field. He traveled to different countries to deliver health care to those who could not otherwise access it. But he did the same when he came back home to America.
Moment of silence. Thank you. Representative Holtzclaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you would, I'd like to make my family welcome, my wife and daughters, and it's my middle child's birthday today, so please make them welcome.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker. I've got two things. One, for some folks who are my constituents and my family, my Uncle Frank, Auntie Majo, and Auntie Ethel, they're in the hospital now. And so just praying for their speedy recovery. And in our district this past weekend, we are reminded why we must act as it relates to the issue of gun violence in Westwood, where I grew up. Was born and raised, a teenager, and two others were shot at a basketball game, and another person in District 86 downtown was also shot. We have to do something. We have to act, and it isn't just an ephemeral exercise. This is a reality that continues to plague our communities. And when we go home, or when you go home, it may be easy to forget how serious this gun violence epidemic is. But in my district and my community, we are experiencing this every single day, which is why we cannot give up fighting, and which is why I will not give up fighting for District 86.
Representative Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, please join me in a moment of personal sadness. My best friend in the medical profession, Dr. Tommy Crunk, passed last week. Tommy was, to put it simply, a great doctor, knowledgeable, able to communicate with the patients, and that communication was an art. He was always available, and I'll miss him dearly. Thank you for a moment of silence. Thank you.
Chairman Clemens.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just ask that my colleagues rise and let's honor tonight. Unfortunately, this weekend we had a 13-year-old girl who was shot Saturday night inside her home over in the Edge Hill Avenue area of Nashville. It appears to be an accidental shooting, and respect her family's privacy, so I won't say her name, but she was a student with two of my sons at J.T. Moore Middle School here in Nashville. And so we'd say take a moment of silence for her, please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a birthday for two very cool people today, Mr. James Dunn and Lance Ray, two dear friends of mine. Just please give a round of applause for their birthday.
Welcome and honoring. Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would be remiss if I did not mention someone who passed in my community on Friday. His name was George Thomas of George Thomas Realty. He was really a pillar of the community, always giving to others. He went to Castle Heights Military Academy. He was a wonderful father, husband, grandfather, a coach, and friend to many. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, for letting me honor his memory.
Thank you. All right, next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to resolutions.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar or referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing in line that has to be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to bills, Senate bills on first consideration.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that Senate bills 479, 734, 1,286, 1,596, 1,657, 1,810, 1,814, 1,881, 1,894, 2,103, 2,151, 2,223, 2,428, 2,498, and 2,915 transmitted by the Senate be held at the desk being third consideration of the companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House bills 3,000 through 3,002 be passed on second consideration and be held at the desk or referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Petitions and memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration, keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar. Probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, item 47, House Joint Resolution 1142 has been objected to by Representative Freeman.
All right, anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask that Representative Yusuf Hakeem be listed as a primary co-sponsor on a House Joint Resolution 1140 and House Joint Resolution 1141. Those are respectively numbered 45 and 46 on our calendar this evening.
Without objection, so ordered. Anyone else seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we are voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor? Oh. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, we have an additional objection. Item 40, House Joint Resolution 1133 has been objected to by Leader Lamberth.
All right. We are voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Well, then, Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
Having received constitutional majority, I declare the consent calendar passed without objection. Most regular table. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Call the first bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2900 by Chairman Kumar relative to occupational licensing.
Representative Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2900 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Kumar moves passage. Following second, Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption of committee amendment number 1. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of committee amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, we passed House Bill 1312, which was signed by the governor and became Chapter 211. It allowed qualified medical graduates to practice 2 years under supervision at a medical center in the state of Tennessee to receive a regular license. House Bill 2900 is a cleanup bill to streamline the sequence of valid visa and licensing. It applies to foreign graduates as well as to United States citizens that have gone to medical school abroad. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Kumar renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2900 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Alexander, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 82, 7 nays, 4 present, not voting.
House Bill 2900, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most read series table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2312 by Representative Baum relative to collection of delinquent taxes.
Representative Baum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2312 on third and final consideration.
Representative Baum moves passage. Following second, Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized. Vice Chairman Wright, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Vice Chairman Wright moves adoption of committee amendment number 1. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Baum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we have constituents that periodically owe money on their property taxes, and under state statute, they're allowed to make partial payments. This is a bill that specifies how those partial payments are to be applied. For example, people may owe property taxes, interest on those property taxes, court costs, or other fees. This bill specifies that those partial payments would be applied to those categories on a pro rata basis. Two advantages: it would make uniform how trustees take and apply partial payments. It would also potentially reduce costs for our constituents because we apply interest on the property taxes, but not interest on interest. If the payments are applied on a pro rata basis, then a portion of those payments would go to pay down the property taxes. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Baum renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 2312 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member votes, any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, one nay.
House Bill 2312, having received the Constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsidered table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2537, Representative Cochran and others, relative to marriage officiants.
Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of HB 2537 on third and final consideration.
Representative Cochran moves passage following second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill. Move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman Farmer moves adoption of Committee Amendment number 1. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of Amendment number 1, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 2537 allows elected district attorneys and former elected district attorneys to perform a marriage ceremony. I will yield any questions. I renew my motion.
Representative Cochran renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2537 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
House Bill 2537, having received the Constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsidered table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1725 by Representative Gant, relative to the length of service award program. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill's on the desk.
Representative Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2331.
Representative Gant moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 2331, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2331 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gant moves passage of Senate Bill 2331 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Ms. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Wright, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate Amendment number 1, move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This legislation comes from our Tennessee Treasurer, David Lillard, and the legislation clarifies the administration of the State of Tennessee Length of Service Award Program known as LOSAP, grant funding, and the use of appropriated funds to pay for administrative expenses to be carried forward into the future fiscal year if unused. Mr. Speaker, I move passage.
Representative Gant renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2331, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Senate Bill 2331 having received the Constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsidered table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1726 by Representative Gant and others, relative to children. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2359.
Representative Gant moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 2359, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2359 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gant moves passage of Senate Bill 2359 on third and final consideration, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Amendment 1 by Representative Pearson. Mr. Speaker, it was timely filed.
Representative Pearson, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Speaker. I mentioned this to you, Representative Gant, when we talked about this legislation, but I have some deep concerns as it relates to not having people who are potentially adopting children or fostering children not being or having immunizations. This amendment is really simple. Notwithstanding subdivision B1, the department shall not place a child who is immune compromised with an individual who does not meet the requirements of subsection A, which you previously articulated. This redesigned subsection B, and it says notwithstanding subdivision B1, the department shall not place a child who is immune compromised with an individual who does not meet the requirements of subsection A. And I mean, the reason for this amendment and the reason I think it is so important is that if you are allowing for an adult to not have to be vaccinated, they should not be allowed to risk the health of the children. This really, and I want children to be adopted. I want children to be fostered. I want all of those things, but we should not put children's health at risk because some adults have decided they don't believe in the efficacy of vaccines. And so this amendment is and would ensure that children who are already prone to potentially dying from illnesses are not going to be placed in homes where they might have an increased likelihood of mortality because the people in those homes are not vaccinated. This is us doing our job and ensuring that we are responsible stewards of the children who are in our care. And sponsor, you mentioned, it's going to be a small segment of kids who are going to be impacted. And this is for that worst case scenario where you have a child actually who's already sick, who's immune compromised, potentially in a home with people who are unvaccinated, which is the worst position they could be in and could very likely lead to their death. And so with that, I move for adoption.
Representative Pearson moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate my colleague and his input here, and in the future we can talk about that more, but I'd rather keep this bill currently in the same posture as the Senate, and be glad to work with you as we go forward, maybe next year on another piece of legislation that might address some of these issues. But I appreciate your thoughts and your concern on this, but I would encourage my colleagues, let's keep it like the Senate version and vote this down.
Okay, any further discussion? Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, I think that with respect to this amendment, it brings out a very valid point. And oftentimes, we in the House, can adopt an amendment and work through it with the Senate as it's moving in the Senate. And even if the bill is different than the Senate bill, we can send it to conference. But if it's something that we need to really consider and sit down and talk about, I think this is the place to do it, before it finally gets done, before it's finally signed. It's an opportunity for us to work together on what could be a good piece of public policy. So I really appreciate, your willingness to say you want to work with him, but I think we have an opportunity before us that we can do it, and then maybe work to convince the Senate to adopt our amendment and follow the House on this. So with that, I would hope that you will vote for this amendment, and let's work through our differences with the Senate and make it the best possible bill that it can be. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative.
Any further discussion? Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Move previous question on the amendment.
Previous question's been called. Any objection? We're voting. All those in favor of adopting House Amendment number 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 24, 68 nays.
Amendment number 1 fails. Call next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, this bill was brought to me by Senator Bo Watson and a constituent of his. And the family went through the entire Department of Children's Services foster care application process in the 22-23 year. During physical exams, she disclosed that the family was not vaccinated for flu and pertussis due to religious convictions and submitted a letter of concern about their religious exemption to DCS. They were denied fostering an infant due to their unvaccinated status. And what this legislation does is it would remove the prohibition of placing foster infants less than 18 years of age in homes with other non-vaccinated children, families. That is, the bill would allow an unvaccinated family to provide foster care for infants 18 months old or less. And the advantage of this legislation is it expands the eligible pool of families for foster care and adoption. And the state will benefit greatly if we pass this legislation. Mr. Speaker, I move passage.
Representative Gant renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We had the opportunity to have, and I'm certainly not questioning the truthfulness of anything that was just said, but we had the opportunity to have the new commissioner of DCS before us. I believe it was the Government Operations Committee a few weeks ago. And I asked her point blank, knowing that this bill was traveling to the legislature, whether or not she knew of or the department knew of anybody who had any child who had been denied foster care or adoption because of the immunization requirements that are currently in law. And she said she did not know of anyone. And this may have happened before her time, but I just question whether or not this is absolutely necessary to place these children's health in danger simply for one instance to which the sponsor referred. We have bigger challenges with foster care and adoption in Tennessee, and I would hate to put anybody's health in jeopardy or their life in danger by removing this simply because of the convictions of another person. The child is our primary interest. Getting that child into a safe environment should be our focus, and this seems to put the emphasis on the other side of the equation. So with that, I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, sponsor.
Representative Gant.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more comments.
Representative Travis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I call previous question.
Previous question has been called. There's objection. We're on the board. All those in favor of previous question, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 71, 23 nays.
Previous question prevails. We're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2359 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 70, 24 nays.
Senate Bill 2359 and received constitutional majority. Everybody declare pass without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call it next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2766 by Chairman Grills and others relative to driver's education and training non-commercial driver's licenses. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Grills, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2356.
Representative Grills moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 2356. Probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage on Senate Bill 2356 on third and final consideration.
Representative Grills moves passage of Senate Bill 2356 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as the Senate amendment, move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 2 by Representative Pearson. Mr. Speaker, was not timely filed.
Representative Pearson, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I had the great privilege of seeing this in our subcommittee and in our full committee. The one thing that I like this legislation, and the sponsor knows this overall, the one challenge that I have is that it adds sort of this policy that you have to be 30 miles away from a driving center in order to be able to get a hardship license. online or to do the training online. I talked with the Department of Safety. They said this is not a necessary requirement to increase safety. In fact, when people are 15 and 16, you actually can take your permit test online. And so just the discrimination, as it were, as it relates to geography. So if you're 30 miles away, you can't take the test. You can take the test and practice online for the 30 hours. But if you're 29 miles away, you cannot do the training online. And so it doesn't really make a difference for safety. And for that reason, I would ask that you will consider this amendment of taking out that 30-mile requirement. And so with that, I ask for your move for consideration.
You have heard the motion, probably seconded. We're voting for consideration of amendment number 2. All those in favor of considering amendment number 2, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 23, 70 nays.
In accordance with Rule 60B, having failed to receive the necessary 2/3 vote, the motion to consider amendment number 2 fails. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Grills, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Currently, Tennessee requires 30 hours of classroom training and 6 hours of driver training to obtain a hardship license. This legislation, as amended, would allow for the 30 hours of classroom training to be completed online if there is not a driver training school within 30 miles of your home. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Grills renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2356, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member cast their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92 nays, 2 present, unvoted.
Senate Bill 2356, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsiders table. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2280 by Chairman Hawk, relative to special occasion licenses.
Chairman Hawk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2280 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Hawk moves passage, following second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Hawk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2280 comes from my community where they learned of a very large outdoor event that was scheduled to occur in Greene County last year. This event intended to sell alcohol by obtaining a one-time per year Tennessee Alcohol Beverage Commission license for a special occasion. However, the location of the event was in the area of the county that has not passed liquor by the drink. This created great concern in my community. When our local officials asked how they could work on this, they were not given many options. What this bill does, it will require the Tennessee Alcoholic Beverage Commission as special occasion applicants to first receive local approval if the event is located in a dry area of that county. That's what it does in a nutshell, Mr. Speaker and members. Renew my motion.
Chairman Hawk renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2280, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, the same member wish to change their vote. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 75, 10 nays, 4 present, not voting.
House Bill 2280, having received a constitutional majority, I declare passed by objection. Motion reconsiders table. Call next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2578 by Deputy Speaker Johnson, relative to certificates of registration for engineers. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill's on the desk.
Deputy Speaker Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2498.
Deputy Speaker Johnson moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 2498, properly seconded. Without objection, so ordered. Deputy Speaker Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2498 on third and final consideration.
Deputy Speaker Johnson moves passage of Senate Bill 2498 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the same as the Senate amendment. Therefore, we will move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Deputy Speaker Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 2498 would allow a graduate of an unaccredited engineering technology curriculum of 4 years to qualify for certification if other criteria is met. The criteria would be 12 years or more experience on engineering projects, written employment reference from 3 engineers currently registered with the state, and they are in good standing. They must pass the FE exam and the PE exam. And this bill would sunset on June 30th of 2025. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Deputy Speaker Johnson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2498, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays, one present, not voting.
Senate Bill 2498, having received a constitutional majority by the clerk, passed by objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2621 by Representative Martin relative to railroads. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bills on the desk.
Representative Martin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2779.
Representative Martin moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 2779, properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2779 on third and final consideration.
Representative Martin moves passage of Senate Bill 2779 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as the Senate amendment, move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Martin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This legislation came to me after discovering an old, outdated fine during a Government Operations Committee audit. This fee was implemented a long time ago to encourage railroads to maintain crossings on public highways. Yet after conversations with TDOT and various railroad owners, we concluded that the fine is not needed. The fine has not been used in decades, and its existence no longer serves a purpose. The railroads have maintained an excellent relationship with TDOT and have always maintained the crossings to the best of their ability. A $10 fine is not relevant in these compliance conversations. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Martin renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2779, vote aye when the bell rings. All those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Senate Bill 2779, received the constitutional majority by the clerk, passed by objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2590 by Chairman Russell and others relative to harassment.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2590 on third and final consideration.
Representative Russell moves passage, probably seconded. Ms. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Holsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt, defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman Holsey moves adoption of Committee Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2590 defines bullying and cyberbullying in the harassment statute. House Bill 2590 will also require a law enforcement officer to make a report, and if the victim is a minor, to let the parents know how to get a copy of that report. Members, a common factor in acts of violence and suicide seems to lead back to a person being bullied. If passed, this bill will hopefully define what bullying is and notify the parents when their child is bullied. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Russell renews this motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. We're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 2590 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays, one present, not voting.
House Bill 2590, having received the constitutional majority, hereby declare passed by objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1554 by Representative Slater.
Representative Slater, at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to roll House Bill 1554 to the first available space on next week's calendar.
Without objection, so ordered. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 141 by Representative Alexander relative to transportation. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bills on the desk.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to SB 0078.
Representative Alexander moves to substitute form Senate Bill 78, properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of SB 0078 on third and final consideration.
Representative Alexander moves passage of Senate Bill 78 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as the Senate amendment, move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is just puts a sign out on Interstate 81 connecting to Interstate 26 that tells you that is the way to go to Milligan University. I renew my motion.
With that, Representative Alexander renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. To the sponsor, would you accept the verbal amendment for Third Bridge at Memphis?
That would be untimely filed.
Thank you, sponsor.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senate Bill 78 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill 78, having received a constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. The most reconsidered step. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2760 by Representative Alexander and others relative to children.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of H Bill 2760 on third and final consideration.
Representative Alexander moves passage. Public second. Ms. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill. Move to adopt and defer to the House sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman Farmer moves adoption of Committee Amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of Amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted the next amendment. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is it strengthens April's law that we put in last year. It requires the court, when making a decision regarding the custody of a child, to consider evidence of physical or emotional abuse, not only to a parent, but also to a child's siblings. It requires the training of judges involved in child custody proceedings to be provided by a judge, a retired judge, or a professional with experience in assisting survivors of domestic violence, child abuse, or child sexual abuse, and to rely on evidence-based research by recognized experts. It prohibits a court from ordering reunification treatment to reestablish a relationship with a parent or a caregiver who has had findings of abuse. It requires any order of reunification to include written findings of a fact that are a basis for the order, which must be filed within 30 days of the close of a hearing or within 5 days of an appeal. Prohibits an order of reunification from cutting off contact with a parent who is non-abusive, and it prohibits the court from issuing an order of restoring parental time to the child or a parent unless the court finds that the child will not be subject to any further abuse or harm, and it requires the order to include written findings of that fact on the basis of that order. That is my bill, and I renew my motion.
Representative Alexander renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, sponsor, for this bill. I actually had the opportunity to meet a couple of people that you brought forth to present on this legislation, and hearing them tell the stories about what had happened to their families and the regulatory gap that exists that this bill seeks to address was very meaningful, and just using data in order to inform decision-making, as well as the qualitative data of children and individuals' experiences, really matters to make good public policy, and good legislation is something we should do more. But I really just want to thank you for this legislation, and also for making sure that the People's House includes our constituents' voices and those who are most impacted to help drive decision-making.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 2760 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays, one present, not voting.
House Bill 2760, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Roll call on the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2289 by Chairman Boyd, relative to healthcare.
Representative Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2289 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Boyd moves passage. Following second, Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption of committee amendment number 1. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of committee amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House Bill 2289 applies to medication aids. Medication aids are essentially CNAs with some additional training. It would allow them to administer meter dose inhalers without a spacer, administer nebulizer treatments, and administer oral or topical drugs as needed, of course, under the supervision of a licensed nurse. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Boyd renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2289 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
House Bill 2289 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider is tabled. We'll call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2047 by Representative Carringer, relative to real property interests.
Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2047 on third and final consideration.
Representative Carringer moves passage. Probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2047 was brought to me to add former public officials to the list of officials who may contest liens on real property believed to lack any legal basis. Because back in 2017, our Secretary of State brought a bill, which was House Bill 0535. Many of y'all may remember that. And it was created because there were certain public officials that this was happening to, and the response was to a troubling trend of self-described sovereign citizens filing fraudulent liens against certain government officials. So this bill was brought to add the former public officials, and let me just list who we're talking about. Individual that is a state, county, metropolitan, or municipal employee, elected or appointed officer, a head of a division, major unit, department within an agency or office of the executive, judicial, or legislative branch that provides meaningful input on the development of implementation of policy, a high-ranking employee within the executive, judicial, or legislative branch who has a responsibility for public information and legislative affairs, fiscal, budget and audit matters, legal, security, or internal affairs, information technology systems, or human resources. So with that explanation, I will renew my motion.
Representative Carringer renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, this has become a problem around the country. Does this have broader protection for the average citizen as well?
Representative Carringer.
Thank you for that question. We hope to bring more broader, possibly next year in a bill, but it does bring broader representation with others who may have been in a position in years past and are no longer in that position. And I will add that a lot of our Register of Deeds, I know Knox County is leading the way on this to where you can go and sign and fill out, that they will notify you within probably 2 minutes if somebody's come up there and put a lien on your property.
Representative Towns.
I think it's a good idea for us to look, as you're indicating, next year for any of us could be involved in that quagmire, have your property tied up and entangled, and it's a doozy to get it out. So I'd love to work with you on that, and thank you for the legislation.
Representative Carringer.
Thank you very much for that question.
Any further discussion? Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative. I don't think I got or truly understood the bill in committee. Can you Can you make it plain for a fifth grader for me, what it does?
Representative Carringer.
For a moment, I would think that I was a freshman presenting my first bill with that question. But anyway, no, as I said, in 2017, the body passed where any elected or non-elected public officials, while you were in office or holding that position, they cannot bring these fraudulent liens against you. But now we're wanting to go back and cover anybody that has been, and I can give you an example from the DA conference. There was a case in Madison County where there were 4 individuals that were stopped riding in a car with 50 pounds of marijuana in the car. And when the individual signed the indictment, he suddenly got a UCC-1 filed for a lien on his property. And all of his property, including bank accounts and all other real property. So this is happening to anyone who's working in any of our departments across our state.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative. I wish you'd explained it like that when we were in committee, but I'll be voting for the bill. Thank you for that.
Representative Powell.
Members, I was just going to say, this is a good bill. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people that will target elected officials and those who have left office or looking to leave office just for retaliatory reasons and try to put liens on their properties. So I appreciate the member bringing this bill. I appreciate the thorough explanation you gave in presenting the bill. So I'll be voting for it. Thank you.
Representative Carringer.
Thank you very much for your comments.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2047 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, nay 3, present, not voted.
House Bill 2047 has received constitutional majority. Everybody, clerk, pass without objection. Most considered tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2327 by Representative Freeman and others relative to suicide. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute conform to Senate Bill 1787.
Representative Freeman moves substitute form Senate Bill 1787, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1787 on third and final consideration.
Representative Freeman moves passage of Senate Bill 1787 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Ms. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Tennessee, we lose about 3.3 people a day to suicide. That means that as of today, around 195 Tennesseans have taken their own life, and 195 families are struggling with unspeakable loss. In Tennessee, we're about 25% higher than the national average. And what this bill does is requires the Department of Health to publish an annual review on suicide numbers, demographic data, and then present it to the House for review so that we can research what's possibly causing this and do something about it. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Freeman renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1787 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Burkhart, aye. Grills, aye. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, 3 nays, 3 present, not voted.
Senate Bill 1787 has received the constitutional majority. Everybody declare it passed without objection. Most considered tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2504 by Representative Harris relative to caller identification spoofing.
Representative Harris, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2504 on third and final consideration.
Representative Harris moves passage. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment rewrites the bill. We're going to move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman Vaughn moves adoption of committee amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Harris, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2504 is relative to caller identification spoofing. Many of us have received a call from a number with an area code that we have found familiar in an effort to get us to answer the phone. And on the other line, it'd be a telemarketer or debt collector who manipulates that number. One of the top 5 scams against elderly people is through telephone calls from telemarketers. House Bill 2504 makes it an offense for a person on behalf of a debt collector or inbound telemarketing service to knowingly cause any caller identification service to transmit misleading or inaccurate information, including caller identification information that does not match the area code of the person or the debt collector or inbound telemarketing service the person is calling on behalf. And in an effort to defraud or cause harm to any other person or to wrongfully obtain anything of value. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Harris renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2504 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has everyone voted? Does anyone wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
House Bill 2504 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2004 by Representative Leatherwood, relative to public health. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Representative Leatherwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1843.
Representative Leatherwood moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 1843, probably second without objection. Supported. Representative Leatherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1843 on third and final consideration.
Representative Leatherwood moves passage of Senate Bill 1843 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are going to move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Leatherwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill simply directs the Department of Health to investigate the frequency of cases of cancer and Parkinson's disease in Murray and Lawrence counties. With that explanation, I renew my motion.
Representative Leatherwood renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, sponsor, for the bill. Just a quick question. Why is it limited to those counties?
Representative Leatherwood.
People in this area, these 2 counties, many people there feel like there's an inordinate number of cases of the cancer and Parkinson. And so they brought it actually to Senator Paige Walley's attention. So that is why, because people in that area requested it.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you so much, because I want to talk with you about Southwest Memphis and how we do this for Shelby County, because we have a cancer risk that's 4.1 times the national average in some areas and 15.2 times the national cancer average in another place. And I've lost both my grandmothers to cancer, so I think this is extremely important. What I am interested in is with this amendment change, it took out the Department of Conservation from being involved in the investigation, and it removed sort of the mention of environmental factors that could be associated with potential diagnoses. Why were those things removed?
Representative Leatherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Originally, it was more of a 2-step process looking to see if there was a problem, and then with the help of the Department of Environment Conservation to try and look at what may have caused the problem. And it was decided to break it up into 2 parts. First part, first look at it and see if there is a problem. If there isn't, then Department of Environment Conservation, others don't need to be involved. So that's why breaking it up into 2 logical parts.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you, sponsor, for the bill. I'll be supporting it because I believe we do have a lot of areas in our communities and in our state where toxic release inventory facilities and other things are impacting people's health. And every constituency deserves to know what is happening and why. I even, had a bill related to this in agriculture, so people could just know where toxic facilities are And I think one of my friends bumped it to May 15th. But the reality is that information is really important for all of our constituencies. It's important that they realize what is happening to them. They realize the toxic facilities that are around them, and they know that there's something that can be done about it with the help of the health department and others really interrogating and being involved in that process. And so thank you for the bill.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. And to the sponsor, I didn't have time to get to you, but I want to follow up. I'm still not clear as to why the Department of Environment and Conservation is not part of it. I don't see how you separate the calls and the location and background from determining if there's a problem and what the cure may or may not be, or how to manage it. Did the departments make that appeal to you, or where did that separation idea come in?
Representative Leatherwood.
Well, first, I do believe it's a very logical separation of the two. First, you determine if there is a problem, and the Department of Environment and Conservation is not set up to look at people's health records and what's going on in the health departments to determine if there is a problem. The Department of Health is in a position to do that. And hence, that's the first step. Is there a problem? And if there is, then the Department of Environment and Conservation and others could play a part in trying to determine what caused that problem. Other part of your question, no, the departments did not come to me. I assume they came to the Senate sponsor. He suggested the amendment, and I was agreeable.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, thank you, Speaker. And I, of course, disagree with the assessment of chicken and egg, which comes first. I still think they're so closely related that they've got to be integrated as they begin the process, during the process, and winding up and actually making the report. So I respectfully disagree with your conclusion, or with the Senate sponsor's conclusion on this. Thank you.
Representative Leatherwood.
Do my motion.
Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here again, I'm concerned about expansion as well. It's a good bill, obviously. In South Memphis, has been indicated, there's a class action lawsuit going on right now because of clusters of cancers that people have. Years ago, the caucus, especially the Black caucus, was dealing with the clusters of cancers that were in Dixon, Tennessee. It was on 60 Minutes. It was so pervasive. Okay, settle down over here, man. Okay, so the deal of it is, this is a very serious and dangerous assault on Tennesseans' health. So while it's a good bill, I would like to see expansion as well, so we can figure out where we have these pockets and do what we can to save our citizens. But it's prevalent across the state in certain pockets. And if we don't do something about it, it'll just metastasize, if you will. So, well, thank you. So next year we do something. I'd love to see some expansion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Representative Leatherwood.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1843, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Serve member vote as a member wish change your vote. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, one nay.
Senate Bill 1843, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsidered table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2254 by Leader Love relative to child fatality review teams. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2445.
Representative Love moves substitute conform Senate Bill 2445 without objection. So ordered. Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2445 on third and final consideration.
Representative Love moves passage of Senate Bill 2445 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the Child Fatality Review Team was formed in 1995 to analyze deaths of children in Tennessee to better understand ways to prevent future deaths. They issue an annual report that includes recommendations of legislative actions. This piece of legislation will change that by doing three things. One, adding 3 parents to the team of school-aged children. 2, it will have the report sent to every LEA. And 3, it'll also have the report sent to the Tennessee chapter of the American Pediatric Academy. Sorry if I messed it up, Mr. Speaker. But I do want to thank some of the covenant parents who work with me on this legislation, on the language, helping get this crafted in the right way. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, I renew my motion.
Representative Love renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2445 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Speak ye aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
Senate Bill 2445, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The most read series table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2177 by Representative Lynn, relative to instructional materials.
Representative Lynn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2177 on third and final consideration.
Representative Lynn moves passage. Following second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Lynn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill requires the local Board of Education that provides electronic textbooks and electronic instructional materials to provide a student reasonable access to a printed version of the electronic textbook or instructional material if requested. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Lynn renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 2177 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
House Bill 2177 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most read series table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1682 by Martin of Carroll, relative to licensed professionals who may sign certificates of need.
Representative Martin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of HB 1682 on third and final consideration.
Representative Martin moves passage. Seconded. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption. Committee Amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of Committee Amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Martin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an administration bill from the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. Last session, we passed Public Chapter 199, which clearly defined a qualified advanced practitioner, which is of the following: licensed advanced practice nurse with a current certification from a national certifying organization, a psychiatric mental health advanced practice nurse, or a physician assistant with a current certification from a national certifying organization as having additional qualification in psychiatry. This bill expands upon 199 and would allow qualified advanced practice providers to complete one of the certified certificate of needs for probable cause of a judicial commitment hearing. Still requires at least one of the CONs to be signed by a physician, allows greater staffing flexibility in state-owned psych hospitals. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Martin renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1682 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, see member wish to change their vote. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays, 4 present, unvoted.
House Bill 1682 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most read series table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1891 by Representative McCalman and others, relative to protecting minors from social media.
Representative McCalman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1891 on third and final consideration.
Representative McCalman moves passage. Second. Ms. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment rewrites the bill, so we're going to move to adopt it and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman Vaughn moves adoption of committee amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative McCallum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a simple admin bill. All it does is require parental consent for minors to have access to social media. It does not apply to commerce platforms such as your Amazons, your eBays, or online auctions. It is simply making, putting the choice in the hands of the parents whether or not they want their kids on social media. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative McCallum renews this motion. Any discussion on the amendment or on the bill? Representative Pearson, you're recognized.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the bill. There's I guess, a healthy tension that exists with this legislation. I definitely want parents to be involved in their children's lives when it comes to social media, because I think we were just talking earlier about the number of suicides, and Representative Freeman mentioned that, and suicides and social media and the correlation, particularly for young women, is quite scary. One of the things that I'm curious about here, and would love for you to opine on just a little bit more, is related to the enforcement and potentially how this would happen with the Attorney General going after social media companies. What would that process be?
Representative McCallum.
The bill leaves it up to the respective companies on how they're going to enforce it. They have to come up with a mechanism that shows a reasonable effort to ensure that parents have given that consent. That was done. This has been passed. Similar legislation has been passed in several other states. The only one that hasn't been come across legal problems was the state of Louisiana, which is what we modeled this after, and that was the one that was able to stand most, and that was because they gave those companies the option and the ability to do it on their own terms. The Attorney General doesn't get involved unless the parents of said child wants to bring action against those companies.
Representative Pearson.
Okay, thank you, sponsor, for answering the questions. Thank you, Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1891 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, 2 nays, 5 present, not voting.
House Bill 1891 have received constitutional majority. Everybody clerk passed without objection. Most reconsiders table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2198 by Representative Mitchell and others relative to threats of mass violence.
Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2198 on third and final consideration.
Representative Mitchell moves passage. Following second, Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Holsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt, defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman Holsey moves adoption of committee amendment number 1. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of committee amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Mitchell, you are recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Mitchell renews his motion. Any discussion? Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
I'll pass.
Representative Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry. This bill is mass threats to schools. It increases the penalty from a Class A misdemeanor to a Class C felony. All the amendment does is make this section not apply to a person with intellectual disabilities. I renew my motion, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sapicki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, is this your first bill?
Representative Mitchell.
I renew my motion, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Holtzclaw.
Call for question on the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Question's been called. Any objection? Seeing none. We're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 2198 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays, 5 present, not voting.
House Bill 2198 having received constitutional majority. Everybody declare passed without objection. Most reconsiders table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2070 by Representative Powell and others relative to transportation. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1807.
Representative Powell moves substitute form Senate Bill 1807, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1807 on third and final consideration.
Representative Powell moves passage of Senate Bill 1807 on third and final consideration, probably second. Ms. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate amendment, move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Call up next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I appreciate all the work we put in as a body. A couple years ago, we passed a task force study that looked at passenger rail, came back with some recommendations. TDOT is still working on some of those recommendations. So with some of the leadership of our transportation committee, we went over and met with TDOT and looked at some of the different things they're doing. This bill simply makes it so that there's an annual reporting requirement from TDOT to give us a progress of the passenger and freight rail public transportation efforts, both at a state and federal levels. These reports have come to both the House and the Senate. And with that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Powell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1807 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye 75, 11A, 6 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 1807 has received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2296 for Chairman Whitson relative to therapists.
Chairman Whitson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2399.
Chairman Whitson moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 2399, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Whitson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2399 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Whitson moves passage of Senate Bill 2399 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are going to move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Call up next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Whitson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill will clean up code dealing with licensure portability for Tennessee marriage and family therapists. By licensure, by endorsement, and reciprocity for marriage and family therapy is currently in statute. With this endorsement process, marriage and family therapists licensed in another state can become licensed in Tennessee as long as they meet Tennessee's qualifications. Demand for mental health services in the state is extremely high. Marriage and family therapists can assist the families in the state deal with a multiple crisis. We already have a process for other counselors, and we have shown as the General Assembly we're committed to increasing access to mental health care. The marriage and family therapists will still pay full licensure fees to the state, and our state board will have oversight of their license, including disciplinary action. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Whitson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Jernigan.
Thank you, Chairman Whitson. Did you have a family therapist? How long have you been married? How long have you been married?
Chairman Whitson.
Be 50 years in August.
Representative Jernigan.
Is it safe to say that your family counselor was the United States Army?
Chairman Whitson.
I disagree. It was a young lady from Donaldson who had a big rolling pin.
Representative Jernigan.
Well, she's from Donaldson. That's my district, so I approve of this bill.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2399 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts their vote, does anyone wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
Senate Bill 2399 having received constitutional majority, everybody declare passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1853 with Chairman Williams relative to home therapy services.
Chairman Williams, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage on third and final consideration of House Bill 1853.
Chairman Williams moves passage. Following second. Mr. Clerk, call it first amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption of committee amendment number 1. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of committee amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this just allows a physical therapist or an occupational therapist to provide services in an assisted living or nursing home in the patient's room instead of having to take them down to the physical therapy area that's designated there. With that description, I renew my motion.
Chairman Williams renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1853 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays, 1 present, not voting.
House Bill 1853 having received a constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Call it next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2826 by Leader Camper relative to conflict resolution. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move passage of Senate Bill. A substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1726.
Leader Camper moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 1726 without objection. So ordered. Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move passage of Senate Bill 1726 on third and final consideration.
Leader Camper moves passage of Senate Bill 1726 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call it first amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, since 1999, Tennessee law requires each LEA to implement an intervention program that utilizes conflict resolution and decision-making strategies for grades 1 through 6. In fact, this program has been around in the United States since 1965. Conflict resolution programs have been proven to bring significant reductions in suspensions, disciplinary referrals, academic disruptions, playground fights, and violence in overall school. What this bill does, Mr. Speaker and members, is it requires the department to use existing resources to develop a conflict resolution program that may be adopted by the LEA and public charter schools to assist students in grades K through 12. Secondly, expands on what's already in law by requiring public charter schools, in addition to LEAs, to implement a conflict resolution intervention program for students in grades 1 through 6. With that, Mr. Speaker and members, I renew my motion.
Leader Camper renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Towns.
Here again, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Now, this bill is aimed at trying to help the kids resolve their beefs without taking it to another level. Is that correct?
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, thank you, Representative.
Representative Towns.
As you know, this is something that was near and dear to my sweet mate, my sweetheart, Miss Cooper, Dr. Cooper. Sometime we talked about that and worked on this for a long time. It's good to see you bring it to fruition like we did some other things, because the young people need to figure out how to dissolve something that many times is nothing but chatter, conversation. And as we did when we were younger, we had ways of doing that. So it's a good bill. Glad to see it slip through on me. I love to sign on to it. She'd be happy. She's smiling now. Thank you for that.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative, for reminding us of Representative Cooper at this moment. She's fought for a long time for conflict resolution, and I'm honored to bring the bill up that honors her.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. We're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1726, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays, 2 present, unvoted.
Senate Bill 1726, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed by objection. The motion read consider table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2395 by Representative Davis, relative to criminal offenses.
Representative Davis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2395 on third and final consideration.
Representative Davis moves passage. Following second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Halsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt, defer to sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman Halsey moves adoption of Committee Amendment number 1. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of Amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Davis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2395 updates TCA 39-16-502 with respect to false reporting. We've added active shooter, and then also we have added some of the language with regard to if a special weapons and tactics team responds. The other thing we've added is currently in the statute, it says that if they respond to any building or place of assembly, form of conveyance, or any other place to which the public has access. But we've also added a private residence or residential building. What is happening is at the end of January in 2024, there was an active shooter hoax call that was falsely reported to Halls High School in Knox County. And even with our prompt response from the school administration, the Knox County Sheriff's Department, and other emergency response teams, it was ultimately determined that this report was a hoax. But the fear and the anxiety from parents and students and staff and the community was very real, even though it was a hoax call. Also, recently, Congressman Tim Burchett had a hoax emergency report reported to his residence that led to an emergency response. And Congressman Burchett, in an interview, said that his concern with these false reports and these false hoax calls is that someone could be seriously injured or hurt. And these are trends in false reporting, and this legislation is to address this dangerous trend. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Davis renews your motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson.
Thank you so much, Speaker. And as I understand the bill, thank you, sponsor. Obviously, it's a real issue because not only do you have swatting or these hoax threats, sometimes it is a real threat. And the issue that you're articulating as it relates to gun violence and the fear and the trauma that many kids still live with. I mean, we had someone walk around with a long arm weapon, and 2 schools went into lockdown in Memphis. And so it is a real problem. Now, tell me, just specifically, because I'm looking at your amendment here, how will this bill be addressing sort of this problem?
Representative Davis.
Addressing which problem, sir? The reporting or the actual incidences, or can you clarify, please?
Representative Pearson.
Yes, the incidences of this occurring, you're seeking to address it by doing what exactly?
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So it's a Class C felony that brings to bear a serious, you could be 3 to 15 years in jail and a fine of up to $10,000. Also, if the district attorney determines if they can calculate from the response from either the sheriff's department or that SWAT team, if they can quantify that number, they could add that dollar figure as restitution as well. So what we're trying to do is ensure that people understand that this is a very serious crime. It's not just a little prank call on MTV. This has legitimate consequences in not only the person who is making the false report, but everyone else involved as well.
Representative Pearson.
Okay, thank you so much for the clarification. It would be the felony, it would be potential restitution for the cost of the resources from law enforcement, ambulances, and other things that happen when a swatting call or a hoax call is made. Am I understanding that correctly?
Representative Davis.
Yes, sir. With a Class C felony, you can be fined as well, up to $10,000.
Representative Pearson.
Got it. For someone who's under the age of 18 perchance who does this. I've heard about instances where people are playing like video games and like they're mad at somebody and they do these sort of hoax calls. That penalty, it doesn't get adjusted based on their age or anything like that, or is the intention that it would?
Representative Davis.
That's ultimately to the discretion of the DA to determine the facts of the case and the incident as to what sort of charge they bring.
Representative Pearson.
Got it. And so in this legislation, it is that they may or it is that they shall sort of implement the felony?
Representative Davis.
So we're including that as something that can be, through the discretion of the district attorney's office, be brought as a charge. So if it is a serious, legitimate, credible hoax threat for a school or for an active shooter hoax call to someone's home that, they're threatening to say, they're calling in and saying, look, there's somebody there, I've got my wife hostage, and the SWAT team shows up. And if the DA felt like that that they could prove that that was something that was very severe, they have that capability to do that. But it's up to the discretion of the district attorney's office.
Representative Pearson.
Okay, thank you so much for answering the question, sponsor. And again, you know where I stand on advocating to end this gun violence epidemic in the first place. I appreciate the reality that we have and that we are living in, and the fear and the trauma that also exists from the epidemic that all of us are a part of, and all of our nieces, nephews, and children are having to deal with, and especially as elected officials, the way that, the radicalization of so many people is impacting our lives. And you mentioned a couple of examples there. And so I do understand the legislation. Appreciate you answering the questions.
Representative Davis.
I renew my motion.
Representative Davis renews her motion. Any discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. We're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 2395 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
House Bill 2395 under received constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reeks to its table. File up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1015 by Chairman Faison and others relative to motor vehicles.
Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage House Bill 1015 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Faison moves passage upon second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment rewrites the bill. Move to adopt and defer to the sponsor.
Chairman Howell moves adoption of Committee Amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chairman Faison renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question on the bill.
Question's been called. Is there objection? There is none. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1015 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
House Bill 1015 having received constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. Most reeks to its table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2425 by Representative Hicks relative to municipal government. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Representative Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've moved to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2422.
Representative Hicks moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 2422 without objection. So ordered. Representative Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2422 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hicks moves passage of Senate Bill 2422 on third and final consideration. Probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Hicks, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 2422 adds notifications to annexations. It requires municipalities to send an annexation resolution to each adjoining property owner within 200 feet, the county mayor, and the county commissioner whose district includes in the district. It also changes the notification from 15 days to 21 days prior to the first hearing on the annexation. It also requires the postage of signage that informs viewers of date, time, and location of the annexation. Senate Bill 2422 sets a 7-day minimum between the local planning commission of public hearing on the plan of services and the public hearing to take action. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Hicks renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2422 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, is anyone wish to change the vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays, one present, not voting.
Senate Bill 2422 having received constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsidered table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the regular calendar.
Call up next calendar, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a message calendar.
Call up first message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 843 by Representative Lynn. Mr. Speaker, we have received a message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to request the return of House Bill 843 for further consideration.
Representative Lynn, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to return House Bill 843 to the Senate for further consideration as requested for the purpose of adding a severability clause.
Without objection, so ordered. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1613 by Representative Powell relative to state symbols. Mr. Speaker, on March 18, 2024, the Senate substituted House Bill 1613 for Senate Bill 1987, adopted Amendment 2, and passed House Bill 1613 as amended.
Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the bill that deals with Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree by Brenda Lee as the official holiday song in the state of Tennessee. The amendment simply adds that it should be included in the Tennessee Blue Book. With that, I move to concur in Senate Amendment number 2.
Representative Powell moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 2. Following seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Amendment number 2 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk. Dogged aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, one nay.
Senate Amendment number 2, having received constitutional majority, hereby declare concurred in without objection. Motion for reconsideration table. Call up the next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1754 by Representative Reagan relative to sunset laws. Mr. Speaker, on March 18, 2024, the Senate substituted House Bill 1754 for Senate Bill 1611, adopted Amendment 1, passed House Bill 1754 as amended.
Chairman Reagan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The difference between the Senate and the House is they have recommended a 1-year extension for general services, and in the House, we voted for a 4-year extension. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move to non-concur with the Senate amendment.
Without objection, we non-concur. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the message calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Unfinished business.
Unfinished business. Representative Chairman Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker Sexton. Upon consulting with leadership, Mr. Speaker, I move that the rules be suspended for immediate introduction and consideration of House Resolution 124.
Mr. Clerk, read the caption.
House Resolution 124 by Chairman Clemens, a resolution congratulate Paragon Mills Elementary School on being named 2022-2023 Reward School.
You heard the caption. Any objections? Without objection, the rules are suspended. Chairman Clemens.
I move adoption of House Resolution number 124.
Chairman Clemens moves adoption of House Resolution 124. Probably seconded. Any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Resolution 124 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes, I have it. I declare it adopted without objection. Most reconsidered table. Lear Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 1339 be heard in the Health Subcommittee this week.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Lear Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bills 1640 and 1643 be heard in the Finance Subcommittee this week.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Lear Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the rules be suspended to place HJR 1142 on Thursday's regular calendar.
Without objection, Thursday's regular calendar. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Announcements.
Announcements. Representative Towns.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Members, got a special treat tomorrow around 4:30. Excuse me. On the 8th floor, there are going to be some 18 countries in Africa represented. They're having a cultural awareness with food and music and all kind of stuff. These are citizens, doctors, engineers, and engine chiefs that'll be there. Certainly want to get to know the members. And I encourage you all to come by and see what they have to offer. It's on the 8th floor, 4:30. Love for you guys to come by and participate. I think you'll be really intrigued, get an opportunity to talk to, see some of our new citizens. They've all been sworn in too as citizens. Thank you. It's called the Taste of Africa is what it is. Okay, it's tomorrow, 4 o'clock. Thank you. 8th floor.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Seersucker Caucus did convene last week, and I'm instructed to make this announcement that the Seersucker Caucus will have our first day on April 1st, April Fool's Day, the Monday after Easter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the members.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Thursday, March 28th, 7:30 to 8:30, the Tennessee Legislative Sportsman's Caucus will be having a breakfast in room 8C. We've got puckets that will be serving food. I encourage everybody to come up. We will also be giving away a 2-day West Tennessee duck hunt and a half-day quail hunt. We'll have a drawing that'll take place that morning. I got people's attention. It'll be this Thursday, 7:30 to 8:30 in 8C. Thanks.
Representative Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. An announcement for Wednesday evening. Chancellor Tidings and the Tennessee Board of Regents, their SOAR Awards will be held Wednesday evening. There's a reception for us at the Country Music Hall of Fame Wednesday at 6. There'll be buses going from Cordell Hull running back and forth during the evening on Wednesday. Also on Thursday morning, folks from Tennessee Board of Regents will be having a breakfast for us outside the hall in the Legislative Library here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to make members aware on Wednesday at 5 p.m. there's going to be a linking of arms for change. Multiple groups are going to be involved in asking all members and members of the community to come together and link arms for change in remembrance of the 1-year anniversary of the Covenant shooting, and to work to continue the work that we're all working hard on for dealing with mass shootings in this country. So I'd ask everybody to come out at 5 p.m. We're going to start at the Capitol and hopefully link arms and fight for change in regards to the mass shooting effort. Thank you.
Representative Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Friendly reminder, Criminal Justice Subcommittee will meet at regular time tomorrow at noon, and then we will meet immediately following Criminal Full tomorrow afternoon.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, on Wednesday, I will be having my District 87 Day on the Hill. I invite you all to come by the chambers at 9:30 if you can and say hello, or on the 8th floor at 12:30 to 3, if you can come by and say hey to my constituents. Thank you. Yes, we have food. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Be there, aloha.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For members who have bills and finance full tomorrow, we will first have a budget presentation from Commissioner Bryson with the governor's appropriation amendment. Following that, we will have an ag expansion request. So if you have a bill up, just watch, and we will start as quickly as possible, but we were going to get through the presentations first. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 95 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the regular order, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House stand in recess until 9 a.m. on Thursday, March 28, 2024.
Without objection, the House stands in recess till 9 a.m. on Thursday, March 28, 2024.